Hello everyone, Coming Clean here. A couple months ago, I did a video where I used my master's degree in biology and my experience as a high school science teacher to rank the Skylanders from Spyro's Adventure based on how realistic their designs are. If you want to watch that video, you can do it by clicking on the card appearing on screen right now. Today, however, I'm doing the same type of ranking with the characters from Skylanders Giants. I hope you enjoy the video. In Skylanders Giants, we have 16 terrifically designed Skylanders. I doubt the designers went all in on realism though, and that is totally fine. I'm not making any sort of critique in this video, it's simply for entertainment purposes. Let's get right into the ranking. Alright, first we have some robotic Skylanders that I am not the right person to rank. I'm a biologist after all. First off we have Bouncer. He's a mechanical being. He does however seem to have a very high center of gravity and he's balancing on a single wheel down here. I guess some sort of very advanced gyro is at play here to keep him standing up. Then we have Sprocket, who wears a very high-tech suit of armor. I'll leave it to an engineer to decide if that one's realistic. Then we have Crusher, who is a rock golem. And rocks are by definition not alive, as I discussed in the previous video. Living bodies, we need some sort of liquid material. Cells, the smallest building part of a living organism, is actually made up most of water. So solid material just doesn't cut it. Not very realistic. And then we have one more thing, and that is the glowing eyes. Glowing eyes do not exist in real life. Eyes are made to absorb light, not emit light. It's very common in both fantasy and science fiction to have glowing eyes on mechs and fantasy creatures and whatever. But the real eye works in the way that the pupil, the big hole in the eye, absorbs light, and then that light hits the optic nerve at the back of the eye, and that's why we can see things with our eyes. Dogs, cats, deers and other animals can appear to have glowing eyes, but that's not exactly the case actually. These animals have a reflective surface at the back of their eyes, and that reflective surface allows light to hit the optic nerve twice. Thus, the optic nerve of these animals can absorb more light, making them see better in the dark, but their vision becomes more blurry. The excessive light from this reflective surface is reflected out from the eye again, and that's why they can appear to have glowing eyes, but some sort of external source of light is actually needed. For example, the headlights of a car or something. If you were to take your dog and lock yourself with your dog in a pitch black room, their eyes would not glow because there would not be any light for the dog's eyes to be reflected. And then we have Hothead. He's a fire golem and he appears to be made up of partly fire, lava and very hot rock. So that is not very realistic. His body would be too hot to sustain any sort of living material, because a very high temperature breaks the bonds of chemicals that is essential for life. So Hothead is not very realistic. Eyebrow. Eyebrow is a physical and digital manifestation of how an eye doesn't work. An actual eye has muscles and nerves attached to it. Maybe those are in his neck, maybe, probably not. Also, an eye is in constant need to be re-moisturized. That's why we blink all the time. So I would say that Eyebrow is not very realistically designed. At least not his head or whatever it's supposed to be. Ninjini. Her upper body is kind of proportionate. Looks quite realistic, honestly. But she flies around on some kind of purple mist that makes up her lower body. Creatures on Earth commonly don't do this, as far as we know. Then we have T-Rex. We went over this in the last video too. These sort of sentient tree animal hybrids can't exist in real life. We do share a common ancestor with plants, but it goes way, way back in time. A couple of billion years to be exact. And some animals can breed with each other even though they are not the same species if they share a recent enough common ancestor, but plants and animals are not nearly closely related enough for these types of hybrids to exist. I'm sorry, T-Rex. Shroom. Such a cool character design here, I just have to mention that. He's supposed to be a mushroom, I guess, and he has these sort of flaps on his cap that make the mushroom cap look like a military helmet. That's some genius character design. And for the same reason as T-Rex, Shroom is not very realistic because mushrooms and animals can't breed with each other. But he is more realistic than T-Rex. Why, you ask? That's because mushrooms and animals share a more recent common ancestors than animals and plants. That's right, mushrooms have more in common with you than they do with the plants growing next to it, as strange as it may sound. But then again, he's not very realistic. Hot dog. He's actually sort of proportionally designed. His head is, however, far too big compared to the rest of his body. And there's one other problem too. He seemed to be constantly burning at his feet and also at his tail up here. And there is a problem with this. First of all, it would be way too hot for a living organism to be actually burning. And it's another problem too, because fire requires some sort of matter as fuel. That's the reason why you put wood in the fire and fuel in your car, because you need some sort of material to make a combustion happen. For a creature to constantly produce the material to sustain a fire is very, very unrealistic. Sorry, hot dog, you look very cool though. Popface, another awesomely designed Skylander, but also very unrealistic. He's basically just a head with arms and legs attached to him. And a body needs more than just a head to function. You need, for example, lungs, a bowel system, and this would not fit into this tiny little body. And then we have Thumpback. He's designed after a whale, obviously. Whales are mammals that have adapted to live in water for the entirety of their lives. They are actually related to hoofed animals like cows and camels. Thumpback, however, seem to be adapted to live on land again. And there's really no problem with this from an evolutionary standpoint. But if Thumpback's species were to adapt to live on land again, they would not keep many of the features shown here. Imagine you holding a squishy ball in your hand, like this. When I hold this ball in my hand, two types of forces are working on the ball. We have the force of gravity pointing downwards, and then we have the normal force pointing upwards with an equal amount, and that's why the ball is laying still. Imagine these two forces being strong enough. Then it would squash the ball together, like this. That's exactly what happens to a whale that's been stranded on land, and that's why it's so dangerous for them to be so. The bodies are not designed to withstand that type of pressure. But when a whale is underwater, the bodies receive a pressure of an equal amount from all directions, keeping their body stable. This is also part of the reason that the whales can become so big. And that's why Thumpback species wouldn't have kept all these features if they were to be adapted to live on land again. And then we have Chill. If you look closely, you'll see that Chill is missing a certain intricate part of her body. You're right, it's the head. Don't worry, it's right here. That doesn't look creepy at all, does it? Chill is very humanoid in appearance, and that's realistic because we know that humans exist. Her head is, however, unproportionately large compared to the rest of her body. Her very tiny neck would not be able to support a head of this size. Exhibit A. I guess we are closing in now on what can be said to be somewhat realistically designed Skylanders. We have 4 to go, and we start off with Swarm. He's obviously designed after an insect, and according to the lore, he actually is a giant insect. He does miss some key features of insects, like he doesn't have facet eyes, for example, the types of eyes that all insects have, and he also has only 1 pair of wings. Most insects have 2 pairs of wings, including wasps and bees. There's one other problem too. His limbs are very skinny. They are probably skinny because he's supposed to look like an insect, and insects have very skinny limbs. Take an ant, for example. Ants are commonly looked at as some of the strongest animals on Earth compared to their body size. But if you were to increase an ant to the size of, I don't know, say a human, then you have some problems, because the volume of the insect's different body parts would increase at a higher rate than the area of their limbs. This means that the more you increase the size of an insect, just scale it up, then the weaker the limbs become. So if you were to increase an ant to the size of a human, then their legs would immediately break and they would drop their head on the floor and die instantly. That's why I think that Swarm has 2 skinny limbs, because in the game he's a massive creature, he's a giant after all. Then we have Flashwing. Don't worry, her other wing is right here. In the game she can't fly, but according to the lore she actually can, so I don't know what's up with that really. The wings she has won't be able to fly for various reasons. That's okay, however. Flightless birds like penguins, for example, had ancestors that could fly, but they can't fly anymore. The biggest problem with Flashwing is that he has gems growing on her body. Gems like these, like diamonds, sapphires, rubies, etc., they form under very specific circumstances, like certain minerals put under very high pressure under Earth. So far, we don't know about any of them growing off the body of an animal. But other than this, she actually has a quite proportionate body design. Okay, 2 more to go, the 2 most realistic Skylanders in Skylanders Giants. First off is Frightrider. And we have to ignore the bony ostrich here. The creature Frightrider rides on is some sort of skeletal being that wouldn't be able to move. The skeleton is a very important part of your body, but you also need muscles to be able to move. But Frightrider himself actually has a quite proportionate design. He's humanoid, obviously. He looks like something that actually could exist in real life. We have the pointy ears that I really can't see any sort of evolutionary benefit for. But that's okay, because there's something that is called sexual selection. That's a trait that appears not because they help the creature to be adapted to their environment, but it actually helps them to breed. Other individuals of the same species find it attractive, but you don't need to have any sort of clear purpose, like huge horns or the feathers of a peacock, for example. So these elves, the species that Frightrider belongs to, they must think it's really hot with pointy ears, I guess. And then we have the most realistic Skylander in Skylanders Giants, and that is Jetpack. Here we have a very proportionate body. All his different parts of his body look very proportionate compared to each other. He's obviously designed after a bird, but he has no wings. The wings of birds are, it's the same as our arms and hands, for example. And for them to evolve into some sort of limb with digits, like they have here on Jetpack, is not actually very unrealistic from an evolutionary standpoint. But for them to evolve into this exact same type of limb that makes up their feet is maybe not very realistic. But other than that, I would have to deem that Jetpack is the most realistic Skylander in Skylanders Giants. Alright, to sum things up, we can conclude that the designers did not have realism in mind when they designed Skylanders from Giants, and that's perfectly fine. If I were to pick the least realistic Skylanders from Skylanders Giants, it would probably be either Hothead or Crusher, maybe. And if I were to pick the most realistic Skylanders, it would probably be either Jetpack or Frightrider, minus the skeleton ostrich, of course. Alright, that's it for this video. If you want to watch the realism ranking I did for Spyro's Adventure, you can find a link to that video in my pinned comment below. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Coming Clean, and I will see you next time. Take care!